You say yes to the project, the opportunity, the thing you know on paper you're capable of. You put it in your calendar. You promise yourself you'll show up differently this time. You imagine the version of you who finally lives up to what people keep saying about you. And then, slowly, reality starts to happen. The deadline moves. The client changes the brief. The event gets postponed. The date gets cancelled. Someone else drops the ball just enough that the whole structure wobbles. And there's this moment, right before you react, where something inside you loosens. You feel it like the smallest exhale. A tiny, guilty relief. Not because you wanted it to fall apart. Not because you don't care. But because some part of you is suddenly safe again. Then the shame hits. Because who does that? Who secretly feels better when things go wrong? What kind of person is more relieved by a cancelled opportunity than excited by a confirmed one? You tell yourself you're self-sabotaging. That you're secretly afraid of success. That you are, somehow, wired to ruin your own chances. You decide this is your fatal flaw. You joke about it so no one notices how close to the bone it is. And you keep carrying this pattern alone, because it feels too strange to say out loud. This is what this video is about. Here's the first thing you need to know. This isn't random chaos. This isn't you being dramatic. This isn't even about fear of success in the way people throw that phrase around. What's actually happening here is a system. A set of psychological mechanisms that all point in the same direction, away from unbearable internal pressure. When you say yes to something that matters, you don't just take on the task. You also take on every story you've ever told yourself about what will happen if you fail. Or if you succeed and can't sustain it. Or if you show people what you're really capable of and then have to live at that level forever. For some minds, especially smart, high-functioning ones, that internal pressure is not motivating. It's suffocating. So your brain does what any intelligent system does when a load is too heavy. It looks for ways to reduce it. Sometimes that looks like procrastination. Sometimes it looks like over-preparing. And sometimes, when the universe or other people or sheer logistics start to shake the plan, it looks like relief. Not because you wanted it to go wrong, but because the weight lifted. What you're feeling isn't love of catastrophe. It's the sudden absence of a threat your nervous system had already decided it couldn't safely carry. Psychologists call this load displacement anticipation, the way your mind quietly tracks where the weight of responsibility is sitting and preemptively relaxes the moment it senses that weight shifting away from you. It's like having a background app always running in your head, monitoring who is currently on the hook. When you say yes to something important, that app flags you in red. You're the one who has to perform. You're the one who has to justify the belief in you. You're the one who will be visible if it falls apart. And because you're smart, you don't just see the task. You see 10 moves ahead. You see the ways it could go wrong, the ways you could be misunderstood, the ways this could become the story that proves every dark suspicion you have about yourself. Then, suddenly, the organizer cancels. The brief changes. Someone else admits they can't deliver their part. And that little app in your head updates the status. The red light moves. The load is no longer entirely on you. Your nervous system responds before your morals do. It relaxes. For a second, you don't have to carry the whole thing. The mind tracks the load, not the fairness. The cost. You mistake relief for proof that you're broken. Psychologists call this expectation collapse relief, the phenomenon where the fall of an external standard feels, in your body, like safety rather than loss. Think about the last time a big thing just didn't happen. A presentation you'd said yes to months ago that got pulled. A date with someone you actually liked that they postponed. A trip you'd been meaning to plan properly that got cancelled. There's a story you told yourself about how you should feel. Disappointed, frustrated, maybe angry. But if you check closely, under all of that, there was also this quiet sense of being let off the hook. Because every expectation is a line your life is supposed to trace. When that line disappears, your margin for error expands. You no longer have to live up to that specific version of yourself in that specific moment. For someone whose self-worth is tightly coupled to performance, that collapse feels like oxygen. For a second, you are free from the demand to prove yourself. The relief comes from the death of a standard. The cost, you weaponize it against yourself as evidence you don't really care. Psychologists call this self-trust volatility, the unstable, all-or-nothing way you interpret your internal responses as verdicts on your character. Most people can feel mixed things about a situation without turning those feelings into identity statements. You don't. If you feel relief when something hard disappears, you don't just register it as a nervous system response to reduced pressure. You translate it into, "I never wanted this enough in the first place." Or, "This proves I'm not built for serious things." Or, "I'm fundamentally unreliable." You treat your momentary reaction like a confession. Like your body just told the truth your mind has been hiding. That makes you terrified of your own internal landscape. You stop trusting what you feel. You start using your feelings as evidence against you in a trial you never stop running. You forget something critical. Your nervous system doesn't care about meaning. It cares about load. It will be relieved when load drops, even if the load was something you deeply valued. The volatility confuses sensation with revelation. The cost, you decide you're unfit for the life you actually want. Psychologists call this catastrophic responsibility projection, the belief that if something matters and you are involved, then you alone are responsible for every outcome, good or bad. This one makes every opportunity feel heavier than it is. You don't experience a shared project as shared. You experience it as a quietly rigged game where, if anything falls apart, it will somehow circle back to you. Maybe you grew up in a system where that was true. Where you were the stabilizer, the explainer, the fixer. Where other people's dropped balls found their way into your hands. So now, when something big comes along, your mind doesn't just see your role. It sees every possible failure point. And it assigns all of them to you in advance. That's the background dread you walk around with while you're pretending to be excited. So when a piece of the structure collapses without your involvement, your nervous system registers a tiny, "not my fault," and relaxes. Not because you wanted the thing to fail, but because the imaginary court where everything is your fault just closed early for the day. The projection makes you the center of every disaster. The cost, you feel guilty for being relieved when you're finally not. Psychologists call this success load forecasting, the reflexive way your mind projects the long-term cost of succeeding at something, not just the benefit. A lot of advice assumes you're afraid of failing. What you actually fear is what happens if you don't. If this goes well, what then? If the book does well, you're now the person who wrote that book, and anything you make next will be measured against it. If the talk is powerful, you'll be asked to give more. If the new role fits, the ladder appears. You don't just see the next step. You see the staircase. And you know, from experience, what happens when expectations scale faster than your capacity to keep performing at that level. So when life intervenes and the opportunity vanishes, some part of you isn't just relieved about dodging possible failure. It's relieved about dodging possible escalation. It's not the thing itself that feels dangerous. It's the version of your life that might get built if it works. The forecasting sees the cost of success as another form of pressure. The cost, your body can't tell the difference between dodging a bullet and dodging a blessing. Psychologists call this outcome detachment craving, the deep, unarticulated hunger to be in situations where you can bring your full self without your entire worth riding on the result. You don't secretly want things to go wrong. You secretly want to be allowed to show up without every move becoming a referendum on who you are. The problem is that most of the contexts where your intelligence and capability get noticed are also contexts that attach heavy outcomes to your performance. Big projects, high visibility roles, moments where people use words like finally and about time about your potential. Inside those contexts, you are never just doing the thing. You are doing the thing under observation. So, of course, there is a part of you that prefers the low-stakes room. The night where plans fall through and you get to be with the 3 people you actually relax around. The project that quietly disappears and leaves you with your notebooks and ideas and no expectation to package them yet. You mistake that craving for evidence that you're not ambitious. It might actually be evidence that you're desperate for spaces where your nervous system can exist in something other than constant evaluation. The craving longs for contribution without judgment. The cost, it gets misread as laziness or avoidance. Psychologists call this narrative foreclosure defense, the strategy of trying to end a threatening story early so it can't end in a way that hurts more. If you've ever thought, I almost wish this would just fall apart now instead of later, that's this mechanism speaking. It isn't that you want it to fail. It's that you want control over when, how, and at what emotional price any failure might happen. A cancelled event you didn't cause is painful, but it's clean. A slow, grinding disappointment where you watch yourself not measure up in real time feels worse. Especially if people you respect are watching. Your mind would rather have an early, external interruption than a drawn-out exposure of your perceived inadequacy. So it quietly routes for whatever would end the story quickly without implicating you. When that exit appears, a logistics issue, a scheduling conflict, someone else backing out, of course you feel relief. The defense wants closure before humiliation. The cost, it keeps you from experiencing the full arc of things that might actually have gone well. Psychologists call this identity overexposure fear. The anxiety that any fully completed, fully visible effort will define you more than you can bear. When you really try at something, when you let yourself care, the finished thing is not just a product. It's a piece of you, externalized. If people don't like it, that hurts. But if they do like it, if they see you clearly and expect more of that, that can feel even more confronting. Because now there is a version of you in their minds that you're not sure you can reliably inhabit. Keeping things hypothetical, unfinished, or interrupted lets you hide inside potential. You can always say, if I'd had more time, it would have been different. Once it's out there, you lose that shield. So when circumstances swoop in and interrupt a process you were on the fence about finishing, the part of you that's terrified of being fully seen gets to stay underground. The fear equates full expression with permanent exposure. The cost, you start colluding, unconsciously, with anything that keeps you from the finish line. Psychologists call this capacity miscalibration bias, the tendency to consistently underestimate your ability to survive intense emotional states, especially the ones surrounding risk and visibility. You don't trust yourself to hold the anxiety of waiting for feedback. You don't trust yourself to metabolize disappointment if something falls flat. You don't trust yourself to stay grounded if something suddenly succeeds and people start paying attention. So your brain treats any scenario that might trigger those states as inherently dangerous. Not because of what might happen out there, but because of what might happen in here. Inside you. Every time life takes one of those scenarios off your plate, you feel safer. Not morally better. Not more aligned. Just less at risk of being overwhelmed by your own reactions. You call that fragility. You punish yourself for it. But if you never learned, in real time, that you can feel intense things without exploding or imploding, your nervous system is just doing the math it knows. The bias underestimates your emotional resilience. The cost, you never get enough data to correct it. Psychologists call this covert alignment check, the quiet moment where your deeper values assess whether what you've signed up for is actually yours or just something you agreed to because you could. Sometimes, the secret relief you feel when a thing collapses is not about fear at all. It's about misalignment. You said yes because it was flattering, because you were asked, because it made sense on paper, because it would look good. But under that, there was a small, persistent no you didn't know how to honor. When the external structure falls away, that no finally gets what it wanted without you having to be the one who says it. The relief you feel is not, "I'm glad things went wrong." It's, "I'm glad I'm no longer being dragged toward a life that doesn't feel like mine." The check uses chaos to correct course. The cost, you blame yourself for not being grateful instead of noticing where you were never fully on board. Now pull back and look at all of this at once. Load, displacement, anticipation. Expectation, collapse, relief. Self-trust, volatility. Catastrophic, responsibility, projection. Success, load, forecasting. Outcome, detachment, craving. Narrative, foreclosure, defense. Identity, overexposure, fear. Capacity, miscalibration, bias. Covert alignment, check. 10 mechanisms. 10 ways your mind has learned to protect you from pressure it doesn't yet know how to metabolize. None of these are laziness. None of these are proof that you secretly want your life to fall apart. They are the opposite. They are the strategies of someone who cares so much about getting it right, and is so afraid of what will happen if they don't, that their system would rather live in the almost than risk the after. So here is the cognitive shift this video is asking you to consider. That tiny relief you feel when something goes wrong is not your true desire speaking. It is your current capacity speaking. It is your nervous system saying, "Given the tools and beliefs I have right now, this level of pressure felt unbearable." You don't fix that by forcing yourself to want success more, or by shaming yourself into iron discipline. You fix it by working on the two variables that actually matter: your relationship to pressure and your relationship to yourself when things don't go the way you hoped. That looks like this: learning, in small, controlled ways, that you can feel intense anxiety and not die. That you can disappoint someone and still be worthy. That you can finish something and let it be seen without having to live in that version of yourself all the time. That you can say no earlier, instead of waiting for the universe to cancel for you. Knowing this won't stop the feeling. The next time a big thing quietly unravels, there will still be that split-second exhale before your guilt arrives. That's okay. That's just the system running the way it was trained to run. What changes first is what you make that exhale mean. You can stop using it as evidence that you are built for failure. You can start using it as data about where you still don't feel safe succeeding. Each time you notice it, you can ask a different question. Not "What's wrong with me that I feel this way?" but "What exactly was I afraid this would demand of me?" More visibility? More consistency? More emotional exposure than I've ever tolerated? That question is a map. It points straight at the skills and supports you actually need. If this names something you've been quietly disgusted with in yourself, you don't need another motivational speech. You need language for what your mind has been doing in the dark. You have some now. If you want more of that, not hype, not shame, just precise words for the ways a certain kind of brain tries to keep you safe, you'll find it here. You can subscribe. You can come back. You can let yourself be seen by something that isn't asking you to be less complicated. You don't secretly hope your life goes wrong. You just haven't fully experienced what it feels like for it to go right without breaking you.